All right, we're back. Okay, keep going.
What happened?
I just had to mess with some setting.
Oh, um,
You're being recorded. I just hope you know.
that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
The like that's the goal. I know it sounds insane, but it's essentially what religions try to establish.
Yeah. I mean,
Like I
pretty
know
much
that you're
every
mortal.
religion has a mythology or whatever you want to call it, a doctrine, something about what happens after death.
Yeah,
Right. This question.
but
Yeah.
what if it was your goal in your life to establish that bridge, not through faith though, like not through intangible aspects of religion,
Right.
like
It,
actual engineering or like technology or a discovery,
right. Yeah. So essentially,
and not like a seance.
instead
Like,
of instead of trusting in the experiences and reports of the various people who have claimed to have experiences that would give them information, like I said, and it's essentially you either trust insider knowledge from some person or you don't. That's what a prophet is. It's just someone who said they've experienced something that
I'm saying
gives
an
them information.
actual
But
bridge. Like you can transcend life essentially. Like you can walk back and forth. In other words, um, whatever happens to humans when they die, you're able to go there and come back.
yeah, that's like you said. If someone could achieve something like that, where they could just anyone who wanted to try it could do it, then it wouldn't be just trusting that person's what they tell you they experienced. It'd be you could you could go out and anyone if they wanted to could go experience for themselves and see. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like if anything is possible,
Having something repeatable.
right? I mean, we're looking at our own code as it stands in modern day. We look at our DNA, we look at our genes, like we're
Right.
looking like a computer looking at its own code.
Right.
And if that's possible, is it? And if anything's possible, is
Some people
that
wouldn't
within the
say
realm of
if
reality?
anything's possible, then yeah. But a lot of people would say there are there are things that are impossible. A lot of people would say that. But I don't. I mean, I think you know within certain logical bounds, I think I probably would say a lot of things that other people would claim are impossible. I would say are possible, just given the
Well,
right
what
conditions.
led me to that thought was the question, what lasts?
What
If you,
lasts?
yeah, like in life,
What endures? Yeah, I mean,
like
if
not just like whatever you create,
it will
whether or
break
not
down
you
eventually.
have children or whatever happens, no matter how notable, it it returns to dust.
Right, yeah, you're right. No, you are
So
right.
what lasts? And my thought was that led the next thought was, well, what if you could bridge what happens afterwards? Like you could just it wouldn't be about, well, what do you accomplish in 100 years of life, of human life? It would be um
What does your consciousness or soul or whatever you want to call it, whatever that part of you that is lasting?
kind of like what's the long game? Like life is so short.
Right.
I understand why people participate in religion, like believe in these things because life is short. So they want to believe that there's you are kind of eternal, right? And some aspect of you is eternal.
Right.
And I don't want to just believe that or have faith in that. I want that to be you can practice that.
Right.
That might get into I don't know, astral projections. Is that a thing?
Well, what's interesting is there are people that do believe in those sorts of things. Some people would say it's pseudoscience, and some other people say it's a hoax or whatever. But there are people that do the research on that sort of crap. Out of body experiences or near death experiences or that sort of thing. They study it and they try to make claims about what you're talking about.
Hmm. I guess not with all the hokiness, though.
Right, I agree. I'm very skeptical too when it comes to those things. When people talk about, oh, he was in a coma or he was declared dead, but then he has distinct memories when coming out of that coma or when coming back from quote unquote medical death. He
Yeah.
has memories of like exact memories of what they were doing procedurally in the medical room, like as if he was outside of his body and he could describe that person could describe what the doctors were doing and what people who visited him and things he couldn't that person couldn't possibly know. All that junk. I mean, I'm very skeptical of it as well. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, if you had the actual ability to get into a different dimension, would you
Right.
tell somebody?
That's another thing. Yeah, I mean, if there were, that's the that's kind of like the Fermi paradox, and one of the answers is there are aliens and they have visited us, but they're just really good at hiding themselves from us. They why would they make themselves known if their purpose was just like as a tourist or something like that? Kind of like, does a gazelle notice the helicopter tour of the safari, whatever.
Hmm.
That sort of concept, but yeah, it could be the same with, like you said, if there was a person that could time travel, if there's a person that could travel through dimensions, would we even be aware that they're doing that? And would they make us aware of it? I don't maybe not. Maybe not. Hey, there was an interesting short story about dimensional travel and how people in a different dimension wouldn't necessarily be aware. I can't remember what it was called, but it was interesting. It was about an architect who was trying to build a building that was impossible to build, but it was possible if you took advantage of I think the fifth dimension or something else. It's something interesting. I'll have to find it. It was interesting. It was like
Hmm.
he was him thinking about how these fourth or fifth dimensional beings would see, perceive, and interact with a three-dimensional thing, and he was making examples about how we would see and
Ah,
interact with a two-dimensional thing if it did exist, and like he
that's
used.
touched upon in Interstellar.
Is it?
Yeah, the
Oh
Tesseract.
yeah, yeah. The Tesseract isn't. It wasn't. Yeah, that was kind of.
That was multi-dimensional, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think so.
Um,
I'm gonna have to try to look
yeah,
up
I
the short
guess
story.
it certainly does feel like one of the things that, let's say, Christianity gets right is that, from my understanding of it, anyways, is that there is a veil in that the apocalypse, in so much as it is a unveiling, is an event I would be interested in.
Right. Yeah.
So not like the
Yeah.
end of the world understanding of it, but
No.
the
Like
revelation, like
a next
yeah.
step in human existence, and right. Yeah. I mean, in some, if you could look at it in some ways as saying it's like what we were talking about. Can an angel just be an interdimensional being, and can a prophet just be a person who has insider knowledge of these truths about reality? And would a god be just this other being who is so different, so wholly different, that to us it seems, you know, like this impossible thing or whatever? Let me. I'm trying to look at this. But yeah, I agree with you, and I think I hope that that's something that'd be cool if that's something that we could in our lifetime see that sort of thing happen. Something really conclusive on the matter. And it, you know what's interesting too is there probably were people in history at times who did think they had that, they were convinced that that was the case. You know what I mean? That they had
That
the
there's a
truth.
veil.
That they had the truth, yeah, and they'd experienced something. And I don't think. I mean, it's like you could say the Bible. You could say that the authors of the Bible aren't trying to deceive anyone, or that they were writing things that they believe to be true.
Does that go into back into self-deception though?
Right, right, yeah. I mean, it's possible. But yeah, I was just saying, I mean, you could have asked those people that had those experiences of communicating with certain things or having certain visions. You could have asked them if that was true and they had those experiences. You could ask them, and they would feel like they knew. You know what I mean?
Well, to that degree, then the things that you experience on different um, drugs, altering your perception of things.
Right,
I mean,
right. And I think uh, there's a very like a lot of those people never mention if they use drugs or alcohol or anything else to alter their, consciousness. It kind of makes you think that they didn't, because I feel like there are plenty of people now who tell you you should use certain chemicals to alter your brain so that you can experience, the vastness of, you know, whatever you want to say.
do you think that's all bullshit?
I don't know. I've never experienced it. So,
This is the tape you're submitting to your law enforcement
right,
agency.
exactly.
I would have no idea what that's like.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I mean, I can't say that they're just being silly or anything like that.
Being silly. So it's talking about the vastness of the universe and, well, God, I don't know.
Yeah, here's what it's called. It's not an aside. It's called "And He Built a Crooked House," and it's a short story by Robert A. Heinlein, and you can look it up, and I'm sure it's online somewhere. It's just an architect named Quintus Teal, and he has a four-dimensional plan for a building, and anyways, it's interesting. But yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, to kind of rein it back in a little bit, do you sometimes get the feeling like
Like I got a feeling.
I
Yeah.
don't know, man. It sounds tinfoil, I realize, but just
I don't think it's.
that
I mean,
it feels like we are limited, and I don't know if it's um, by the human form itself or what, but there
right.
really does feel like a limitation for our brains, and I don't even know if that's because of a block that's intentional or unintentional. And
Or
again, this
just the
goes
capacity, the ceiling
of
is
the brain.
there. Right.
Yeah, of the brain. Like you're not designed to, your comprehension is designed to be limited. Or
Or
it just
it
is
it
through
is
evolution.
as it is. It has
Yeah.
as it's developed. It is. No, I agree. I think we're very limited. I think our perception, our ability to perceive things is limited. I believe our ability, obviously, to compute is limited. And
Yeah.
so, why would a being with limited perception, there are obviously things going on, even in the reality we can detect with the aid of technology we've developed,
Sure,
that we
yeah.
can't perceive. So, why couldn't there be even more things we can't perceive, and things we can't even perceive with the aid of technology? And then, on top of that, like you said, we know we're limited in terms of computation. We know that we've already developed other machines that can can beat us in those respects as well. So doesn't that stand to reason that there could be a being, who knows, that is beyond us in those ways, and then who the hell knows what they perceive and can reason, and what they know is true? I don't know.
So it's not really crazy thoughts.
It's
It's
not
just,
crazy. I
but
think
I mean,
it's very rational to think that
isn't
we're
that a
limited.
pain in the ass though?
Well, yeah, it kind of sucks. And
To realize your limitations is like it's a sobering thought.
right, but it can also be an exciting thought too, right? I mean, the idea that we're not it. I think a lot of people have kind of settled on like you know, they think that our logic is the gold standard, and what we reason is the truth, and if it's not logical and reasonable, therefore it doesn't exist, and it's not the way it is, and they're
Right.
very and this whether they're an atheist or they're something else, it doesn't matter. All it is they're so confident in the human in their own. It's kind of like solipsism in a way, or it's kind of like this Cartesian uh, convincing yourself that it's not just there's no merit to thinking that our limitations could mean something else is going on, but just they actually think that if it doesn't make sense to me, it's not true. Or if it doesn't, if it's not falsifiable in a lab right now, then it's not the case, and they're
So
very
the people who are not
strict.
in that category, the people who are more or less excitable and dreamers.
Or it just has something to do with gnosis. It's just your philosophy on how you know things and what you know the capacity for human reason and everything else. Those are all things that it's a framework. It's like it's a lot of assumptions and stuff. So
But are we waiting for those discoveries, or
we could be.
some of us are actively out there pioneering or discovering things, and so they're kind of almost surfing that wave of just discovering the possibilities or enabling those discoveries, and others are kind of sitting back looking at the stars.
Most of us are.
Right. And I understand that you have to have a certain population size before you can have
Right.
people dedicated to tasks that enable those discoveries.
It's the same exact thing as in an individual, that pyramid of self-actualization. The whole human race has the same pyramid where you have to meet certain needs and you have to have certain functions covered by a part of your population for that tippy top of the pinnacle to even have a chance to explore and innovate and invent and do things that are so much more risky and nebulous and hard to pin down and not practical, I guess, in the way that everyday life certain tasks are essential. So the human race has to, yeah, like you said, it has to have a certain setup in place for anyone to even have a chance of trying to discover certain things or explore certain frontiers. But I think we're just here on the cusp of even advancing to the point of exploring space in a real way, and the concept of maybe even becoming like what is it, a type 2 or a type 2 society, where we might be outside of this planet. We might be, trans-planet society, or we take over, we harness the energy of the entire sun and solar system, that sort of thing. We're just there. I mean, that's like baby steps, to doing shit like traveling through different dimensions and figuring out, doing like not quantum computing, but like what are the fuck the next level is of just logic matrices and that sort of shit. Like you're talking about, we're talking about the answer is 42 sort of shit.
Right.
Like, the
It's
entire
hard to say.
universe is a fucking supercomputer sort of stuff. You know what I mean? So, I don't think we're anywhere near that. You know what I mean? Don't you think?
Yes, but it makes me wonder what's the role then of creation in terms of art or stories or music? What's the function there?
Some people would say that might be the expression of what's common to all human beings is that desire, sort of the impetus behind those people who can actually get to the real stage, but just all of us kind of participate in our own way, our own limited way of just making a song or painting a painting, or you know what I mean, like trying to grapple with what reality is and what makes us human and that sort of thing.
So wait, what's the purpose of expression then? Is connection?
I think it may not be the purpose of expression. It's just expression is something we naturally do because of something that's fundamental to human nature, and that's the same thing that's driving a human being to eventually truly create. And now, and a lot of people would say it's because we're all the image of created in the image of God, and this is an expression of that sort of thing. We're kind of we're creative because he's creative, and we desire love because he's love, and we desire truth because he does, and all these other things are just sort of the imprint of the creator. But again, that's if you subscribe to a sort of theistic religion of some kind.
Which may or may not amount to semantics.
Right, right. Like if you think that's all hogwash, but you think there's always the chance that there is a quote unquote alien intelligence that's so far beyond human understanding and abilities that seeded life on Earth and even helped direct events like the Big Bang and the physical laws and all these other things. If you can imagine this, trans-dimensional ultra being, and you're like, oh, that makes sense, but then someone puts the word God on it or puts the word whatever on it, and then you're like, that's bullshit. I mean, yeah, I don't want
That
to.
probably happens more times than not. I'm wondering if you were one of those beings, would it be the equivalent of a human being taking any interest in an ant? So
I've said this
why
before,
can
and it pisses off so many people, but I've said that all the time. I said, would an ant know he's being observed? Would an ant even understand what observation means? Would an ant be able to even fathom the depths of your mind as a human being relative to this ant? You know what I mean?
So we have human beings that dedicate their lives to studying these different creatures, right?
Right.
So wouldn't it stand to reason that there are beings above our intelligence and capabilities who, unlike many of the other beings that are on their same level, unlike them, they take an active interest in us?
Right. And like you
Even
said,
though we're the equivalent intellectually to an
in
ant.
relative terms, yeah, like
Right.
and there are people who are entomologists and they have ant farms, and there are people who use ants for their own purposes of agriculture or whatever else it is,
Nefarious means.
or just they play with them. They're capricious and pernicious, and they have ants for their own amusement. And who knows. And I've again, people are so insulted by this when I say it, but I'm like, why are you insulted if you're an ant compared to some other being, or you're a dog and you just barely can just barely understand what your master is telling you.
Yeah.
Like, you can just barely understand the concept of sit or stay, or you can barely understand the concept that this master is giving you food and shelter, and when your master pulls on your leash to stop you from getting hit by a car, you have no fucking clue that that your master saved your life. You're just you feel a choking sensation in your throat or whatever their leash is doing. You know what I mean? You don't understand.
Well,
And a
do
lot
you
of
think that a dog would, however a dog thinks or perceives things, it's thinking, I understand that you want me to do this, but do you understand that my line of thinking, or is it just simplified? Like, okay, yeah, we do get animal needs; they're pretty simple. Like they don't go beyond that, Because what if a
Right.
human is interacting somehow with a being of greater intelligence, and even though we're understanding some simple things for them, we're also thinking, I'm capable of so much more,
Right. But
but
there's
you
a
got to help me.
disconnect.
You got to help me get to that level.
Right. And this is an interesting point because if you were to subscribe to like a Christian narrative, it seems like there's a direction. It's not just it's not just random happenings and cycles and things like that. There's a point, and it's just we haven't hit the end yet. And it's one concept that has been spread around is that life is a veil of soul making, or it's kind of like a process to forge individuals, and then they graduate to that next step. That's what death is, and
Hmm.
that and so what you were saying, that
Whoa.
how can you teach, how would you teach that dog, or help it develop to the point
Oh
where
my
it can
gosh.
understand?
Yeah.
A lot of people say that life has a lot of struggles and problems, and people experience so many things. But then, what if it was all part of a formative process, not just this isn't all there is, and there's just crap's happening. It's sad. But what if there was actually something we don't understand what's going on fully, but at some level it's doing what it's supposed to do in order to create. It's like the creative process isn't instant. And I've told people this all the time. I'm like, what if it's not just like how the universe wasn't made in an instant? What if it was a process? And what if the same is true for human beings, the human race in general, and each individual? We're going through a process, and instead of and someone could easily say, "Oh, why isn't it easier? Why isn't it like just pull a switch and then everything's print press done?" But that's very
Hmm.
naive. That's a very naive thing to say, because in retrospect, or in the eternal viewpoint, wouldn't it seem like even thousands of years or millions of years or billions of years are just a blink of an eye, and that process is like just a
Oh
printing
yeah.
press. It is just like pressing a button like make human, or make human race, or whatever
But
the
our
case may
perception
be.
of
But our
time,
perception of time is so different that it seems long and
it skews
arduous,
it.
and
Right.
it seems painful, and it seems like all these things. Like how, if you could ask a piece of clay how the furnace went,
Yeah.
or if you could ask like a chair how that sawing and grinding was, how that feel for you, like I don't know, but it's just interesting to think about. And so I th-
Oh man.
I think it's just I think you're having an experience that it's very common for a lot of people, in that you're asking that question, and it's certainly a possible question. Or I mean, it's positing that question isn't irrational. And some people would lead you astray in telling you that it is irrational to even ask those questions. But I would say that they're they have certain assumptions about reality that are also unfalsifiable, that lead them to make that conclusion. So it's kind of just one also unfalsifiable assumption versus another. It's not actually my provable falsifiable position versus your unfalsifiable, unprovable, worthless position. So I think struggling with these sort of questions is very normal, and I think the responsible person, in my opinion, is the one who is open about it and understands the human limitations, and kind of sees that there is possibly something going on that is more.
Is that your personal belief?
Well, I mean, I think I've told you before. I'm a Christian, so I
Right.
subscribe to the you know the Christian the Presbyterian flavor of Christianity specifically, but
Grape.
yeah, so yeah, grape flavored. But yeah, so yeah,
Um,
I'm yeah.
because I
So
really like that that structure of it, like the idea that this is a a, a what's it called? Not a building ground or testing ground.
I use the term that's been used for hundreds of years veil of soul making, and but it's the same idea of just it's a formative process. It's a step. Life for each individual and the entirety of human history is part of a process and a narrative that has an ending and has a point and next step and that sort of thing. But
a proving ground? Maybe that's closer.
yeah, I don't know. And so some people, but I think if you're part of a religion where you have to do certain things to like earn that next step in the process, you know what I'm talking about? Then I could see where proving ground would come into play. Like if you're in the sort of Buddhism or Hinduism where you have to achieve
Yeah.
a certain thing in this life to transcend to the next level or the next state of being or whatever it is.
Instead of being reincarnated back into the general fold.
Right, yeah, you escape the reincarnation cycle and now you're
Right.
you're the Buddha or you are in the wherever state. But,
Is nirvana the escape?
I believe nirvana is part of the process. That's
Or
when
is
you
it
truly understand nothingness or something like that. But in any case, what we're talking about is in those instances, in those religions, it is a proving ground. Life is for each individual to prove if they are worthy or ready for the next step, right? And then I think if you subscribe to the Protestant Reformed Christianity, it's not that you're proving yourself, but it's kind of that God teaches you about who you are in comparison to Him, and He teaches you a little bit about who He is. But then the next step is really when you're going to meet Him for reals. You'll truly then at that point you'll really know.
Meet him IRL.
Yeah, like you'll meet Him, yeah, IRL, and you aren't just. It's not just you got, hey, yo, I got that letter you sent us, that Bible thing. Like, I read it and it made sense. But it'll be more, you'll be less limited, and the situation will be different, so you can better understand what's supposed to go on, and you'll, at that point, have been formed into the being that you are supposed to be, finally. I don't know,
I wonder if that's similar to... So, where will comes into play would be, did the human in his or her life seek beyond, or seek to understand that element of life? Some people would say that.
Some people would say
that. And
if
you didn't, if your will was not, it was to just revel,
enjoy the life, or
whatever. Revel or enjoy just being human, but
or wallow in the pain or pleasure of it, whether depending on what you focus on. But yeah,
kind of the equivalent of taking it at face value.
Right.
Like if you're good with being here, and you ascribe to, well, maybe you're not even thinking about it, but let's say you do get reincarnated back into just
right.
Hey, if you're down with the human experience, we can keep this party going.
And it just keeps forever because you'll never care enough to go anywhere else.
Right. There are no consequences essentially beyond things that you readily see or experience. There's no, oh well, hey buddy, you did this in life. This is what happens afterwards, and. Because my personal belief is that there's no... I think we've touched upon this in previous conversations. Heaven and hell being earthbound concepts, like, they're just consequences to your behavior. And then I want to say I lean towards the idea of some type of reincarnation. Like, I'm really not 100% on any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just try to understand the different aspects of religion outside of the context of, hey, this is only particular to Christianity. Don't try to understand it outside of how we're defining things or how we're naming things.
Right, like, so I said, there could very well be just a semantical issue.
Exactly. Like, I try to see beyond that, to pull whatever truth can be found from me there. And part of that is this idea that when you started talking about the idea that you can. This is a place where a soul is essentially developed, or
Like an incubator or
yeah, or it
fetus.
regresses, or it stays neutral, or it's kind of that's determined by your own will, though. Like that's where you get to weigh in, and outside of the context of any religion, that means you can keep playing this game, you can make it worse for everybody.
Almost like a Matrix scenario, right? Like some people willingly stay in it, some people are you are uh, ignorant in it, and some people escape it. The movies, Matrix movies.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because I've thought about the idea of life as a simulation and how you get to a certain point in evolution where there's no sickness or death or any of these things, but you need to simulate a reality in order to be engaged at this point
Hmm.
because actual reality there's no challenges, there's no conflict. Um, but I'm not sure
Right.
how that, like, in other words, you're actually buying back in. You put in a quarter, you are represented by an avatar, you die, and then you can pick the game you want to play. Do you want to go back to that game? Do you want to start another game? And sleep is kind of that disconnect. Sleep is when you go back to actual reality,
Oh my gosh.
but the rule is you cannot remember um, when you're playing, you have
Right.
no access. Well, maybe you do have access. There's bugs in the code, but you're not supposed to know that this is a simulation.
Yeah, I read a book where a person, his dreams are one reality, and then his waking is another reality, but then it's like they're both realities. So there is no dreaming and waking. It's just we're always in a waking dream. And then there's a interesting movie called The Waking Life that is actually has a whole bunch of different. It presents a whole bunch of different philosophical viewpoints. Anyway, sorry. Back to
No, no, absolutely.
simulation.
I mean, if we even go to Poe in regards to all we see or seem is but a dream within a dream.
Hmm.
I mean, is that really that far fetched?
No. And then
Look at the games we play. We're already participating in simulated realities for some of us for hours on end.
right. It's like if you could get away with it, all you did, you
You
would.
would do it,
But
yeah.
you have to deal with the I have to have a job to pay for the internet connection and the food that feeds me and all the other crap.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a valid question at least. And yeah, it's like I feel with you, like if you could just prove it, something that someone could just develop some way of knowing for sure, and everyone can test it and know it for sure. But
I
so,
mean, maybe it's okay not to. Maybe it's just okay to be open to the consideration and then accepting of the reality of being mortal.
right, yeah, I
So you're
mean,
like, yeah, it's all possible, but I'm gonna try to get some enjoyment here, be a good human being, and then be done with life.
right, and then either it's a whole new challenge or a whole new experience or enjoyment or whatever it is, or it's not. I mean, right,
I don't like. I get that that's usually how it's presented, but I really don't believe in nothingness. That I can't put any faith into whatsoever.
and I think you're right when you said faith too, because in either position you kind of just you have to land on some sort of assumption, and it's not based on just
Right.
it's not just based on math or something. I can't just show someone a proof and they're like, "Oh, right, okay, it adds up. This is how it is." And no
Yeah,
one
you'd
can.
have to understand first consciousness in general.
Right, yeah. So there's so many things, there's so many black boxes that we're dealing with that no person can come up to me and really know, when they say it's just going to be nothingness, man. I know it. Like, no, you don't. You have faith that it's going to be
Yeah,
nothingness. Like you,
exactly. And which is funny because it places both individuals in the same group.
right? We're all in the same boat. That's the problem that people have. It's like we're all in the same boat, and we all have these a priori assumptions and frameworks about how we experience reality and interpret it. And just because I have this different place that I'm at or this different viewpoint doesn't mean you and I are enemies now, or that we can't even engage in being on the same boat at the same time, doing things together.
Yeah, I mean, that gets. There's probably a root cause to that, though.
Yeah, it's interesting that the us versus them phenomenon, it just manifests itself in so many aspects of human life. It's like we're hardwired for that.
It's like
And some people would
the
explain.
fear of being wrong, the fear of whatever you're believing in or investing in, you're wrong. Like there's a possibility that you're just completely wrong. And I don't know if that's a part of it, but it kind of feels like it touches upon it because if you're deeply religious or deeply an atheist and you're thinking, hey, either like what if I'm wrong or something
Right,
like that instead of a problem of nomenclature or hey,
right,
look, we're just describing these characteristics to a thing that exists, but we don't have enough of an understanding of it, but
right,
other people throughout history have felt it.
right.
I don't know.
It's kind of like if there's an invisible chair, someone else sits in it, two people in different places in the room view this. One person says they're sitting on a chair, the other person has no word for chair, and maybe they're standing in a different position, and they say the person is clearly engaging their quads in the right way, and they're assuming the position of sitting in what I call a what's another word for chair? They're
Sofa?
yeah, they're pantomiming a sofa, and then the two people are like, "No, it's a chair. It's actually there." And they're sitting on the other person's like, "No, they're pantomiming what it would be like to be on a sofa." And they're like, "No, chair, sofa." And then, you know, that's sort of what's going on is sort of it's almost like the kind of postmodernist linguistic thing about how your reality is constrained by your language, and your framework in your mind is influenced by the set of words and definitions for those words. Just like how any computer would be limited in its understanding of something if you didn't give it the right semantics and syntax and whatever else it needs.
APIs?
Right, yeah.
Um, so what's the need then to bring people into the fold?
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's certain groups, and this isn't just religion; it's just any sort of groups that hold some sort of knowledge. Some
Mm,
groups seek to have a secret knowledge, and they seek to keep it to themselves, and whatever. And I'm not talking about it; it's just Illuminati or fucking whatever. But there have been throughout history plenty of groups where it isn't about telling everybody how it is, and it's not about spreading it to everybody they can and getting everyone to
mm,
agree. Some groups it isn't, but a lot of groups, yeah, it is about proving the other person wrong, or it's about convincing yourself and everyone else that you're right, or it's about getting people into your organization. And that sort of crap. That can be political, it can be religious, it can be philosophical, it can be economic, whatever. You know what I mean?
mm.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but
No, definitely. All those elements kind of there's an interplay.
right.
You can't really separate them because it's multifunctional.
Right, and And it could be pride based, or it could be selfishness based, or it could be self-preservation based, or it could be the desire for people to like you, or it could be um, those yearnings that you were talking about, just the desire to know what's going on, and why wouldn't you want other people to share in your enjoyment of that, or confidence in that, or peace that you gain from that, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
I don't know. And some people have a commission. It's built within their own system to say you're supposed to tell other people, and you're supposed to. You know what I mean? I know that for Christianity, that's the case. There's a charge within it telling you have to spread the good news, and they're gonna hate you for it. Some people will hate you for it. Some people will do terrible things to you for it. But you gotta just keep spreading the gospel, and that's what you're supposed to do. So
Do you believe you'll always, um, I guess, be a Christian?
um yeah, so the concept there is that I'm so here's my thing. I didn't choose to be Christian. Let me just say, like, I didn't
Hmm.
I didn't wake up one day and say I'm gonna believe in Christianity. Yeah, yeah, that'd be good. You know what I mean?
It's more like you found truth.
Like I was exposed to things, evidence or testimony and concepts, and then at some point, I think I was 5. It just I was convinced, and then just that framework is how I interpret reality, and that's just how it's been. And some people, some people would say that it's I have faith in this thing, and that was not something. Obviously, it's not something that I earned. It's just it was something. Could have been something impugned to me. It could be given to me by the Holy Spirit or whatever it is. I mean, so that's what some people explain it as. Uh, but I would say that no one chooses what they truly believe about ultimate reality. It's just all of us are influenced by somebody else. We read something, we hear something, it's an experience you have. Something happens, and you're convinced or not. So anytime someone presents something to me, if that thing has the force to convince me that that's the truth, then that's what I'll think is true. And if it doesn't, then it won't. So, I mean, pretty much my whole life I've been convinced, and if you, whatever you want to call it, have faith, and some sort of confidence, whatever, trust in that being the case. That's the that's the as far as we know, that's what I think reality is. That there are parts that the Bible was essentially letters written to the human race by a god through various authors to explain to us the basic information we need to know in order to understand who we are, understand who he is. And like I said, in a limited way, but just like
Oh my God,
in a
like the
sufficient way.
equivalent of sit.
Kind of like, yeah, I mean, just enough information to understand. Like
That would
he's
pertain to humans, just like you're
right.
not going to teach dog math because it doesn't
R-
pertain to their existence.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there's just a sufficient amount of information. It's not exhaustive. So the Bible isn't an exhaustive text on all things. It's just it tells you enough you need to know that God is the creator, that he designed the whole world, including, and this is my own interpretation, but including the Big Bang occurring, including millions of years of evolution, including all the things we've observed in science, some people would say to me, "Oh, you're blasphemy," or some people would say to me, "Oh, you're just an idiot that's inconsistent with what it says," or whatever. And I'll be like, "All right, that's my interpretation. Sorry,
Sorry.
I'm just working with what I've been given here." And but yeah, and then the whole concept being that human beings, we are flawed. We're not perfect, right? Would you agree with me that human beings aren't perfect?
Perfect?
By the definition, perfect meaning without any faults or flaws, like something that never makes a mistake, something that uh, just can't do wrong, that sort of thing.
Is that a rhetorical question?
Uh, I'm just telling you my definition of perfect.
No, I mean, but when you when you ask if I agree, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to not agree unless we were using the Goodwill Hunting version of perfect, where it's not are these two individuals perfect, but the question is, are they perfect for each other?
Right, no, no, I'm talking about perfection being like this absolute thing
I would
of
say we're clearly
not
not.
perfect. Yeah, exactly. So the Bible kind of tells you that, and then God, throughout a period of time, demonstrates clearly that's the case. And then what happens is he says, "I'm perfect. You're not." This sort of alienates the two of us, or your group and me.
Hmm.
But here's the deal: I'll come to Earth as a human being. This is Jesus we're talking about,
Right?
and I'll experience this suffering in this world, all the troubles that you have. I'll experience it, but I'll do it right. And then I will die for you. I'll pay the price of your imperfection. And so that in his mind, it simultaneously uh, makes his justice complete. Sort of like the sins are paid for, the debts paid for. Things are balanced in that way. But now, since he did that for you, that you sort of like substitutionary through grace and mercy, grace being kind of being given what you don't deserve, that is the righteousness part, and then mercy being not getting what you do deserve, which is the death and the suffer and the ultimate destruction uh, that Jesus experienced for you on the cross and in hell, or whatever you want to say, the intervening time between death and resurrection. And then he gives to you through that sort of propitiation, or whatever you want to call it, he gives to you his righteousness, so now you're part of his family. It's sort of like he's extended. Since we couldn't possibly be the ones to rectify the situation, we couldn't reconcile. Like, we weren't going to just of our free will, our sinful nature, be like, "Hey, yo, God, you were right, we're wrong, and we're gonna be good now." It's just now Jesus said, you don't have to be perfect. I have paid paid your debt. You're no longer at odds with me. I love you, and we can be a family. And that's essentially the whole story. And then now we're just sort of in a time when we're between that being accomplished and the ultimate goal being accomplished, when the entire human race will graduate to the next step. And that I don't want to. I don't know a ton of stuff about the apocalypse or end times or whatever, all that stuff, what it's going on. I mean, I've read Revelations and I've heard concepts about it, but I'm not totally, an expert on it or anything. But I
Well, two questions.
have the basic stuff down, I think. So I just think it just makes sense to me, and
Do you perceive God as perfect?
I do.
And then the second question is, um, his or the being's creations. Why create imperfect things?